Hello, hello, everybody. Reggie Reglis here from Keller Williams Real Estate. Also have Delise here. And we have a very special guest today, Tanisha Hurd. And she is going to be sharing with us some really important things about Juneteenth, a celebration of freedom. So we're so excited to have her. She has done a lot of research and done a lot of presentations on this topic. And it's just so exciting what we're going to learn today. So take it away, Tanisha.
Thank you, Reggie. Thank you. I'm so honored and happy to be here. So, I mean, goodness, Juneteenth, it seems like just a few years ago, no one ever heard of this term. And now it's buzzing everywhere. And that's really exciting because it is a celebration of freedom and it's a celebration for all Americans. And we're going to talk about why that's important today. So, as you're watching me go through my slides, just know that, I'm trying to summarize a lot of research and information into a nice summary for you guys so that you can understand why this is such an important historical celebration, not just for the African American community, but for all Americans. So you might have heard right now there's some buzz about making Juneteenth a national federal holiday. And that's really exciting. The idea or the bill has actually passed in the Senate. And we're just waiting for those final votes from the House. So fingers crossed. Let's hear about why we should all be celebrating Juneteenth, the celebration of freedom and America's second Independence Day. So just to give you a short history lesson for anyone who wasn't paying attention in class, we're going back to America's birth. It was 1619, the year 1619, when the first slave ship landed in the New World. Later to be called America. And cut to over 100 years later, the founding fathers signed the Declaration of Independence in 1776. There was a lot of discussion then about what our country was going to look like and all of that good stuff. And one of the critical topics in those discussions was the topic of slavery and representation. But that actually would not be addressed until almost 100 years later during the start of the Civil War, when Lincoln signs the Emancipation Proclamation, granting freedom to all enslaved people, African Americans who were brought over to this country as slaves. However, the reason why Juneteenth is so important is it was actually on June 19th in 1865 when Union soldiers arrived in Galveston, Texas, and told that very last plantation, or that plantation of enslaved people, that they are free. And this commemorates the end of the Civil War in 1865, 2 years after the Emancipation Proclamation was signed. And a lot has happened since then. And here we are, present day. We can change that to 2021, but present day, we are celebrating Juneteenth as a nation. And here's why. Go to the next slide. So we've talked about 1776 and July 4th being Independence Day. It was freedom for some, but definitely not for all. And during those discussions, again, when the Constitution was being written, the states were talking about representation in the House and who was going to represent them. And it was all determined by population. And the South had a larger population than the North at the time, but the majority of that population were enslaved people or Black people. And at that time, it was decided that, okay, every Black person, every Black man will be considered 3/5 of a person, so that the South would have representation that they wanted to be considered for votes and for legal matters in the government. Can you imagine that? Being told, or even just trying to comprehend your whole life, that you're only 3/5 of a person because of the color of your skin or because of your status. No rights and 3/5 of a person. So it's kind of traumatic to even think about to this day, but this is why we talk about this. So this was back in 1776. Now, the Civil War started, like I said, almost 100 years later, and that takes us to our next topic of Juneteenth. So I mentioned it before. It took 2 years for the information to reach the South. So in those 2 years, people were hearing the buzz, are we free? Are we not free? Are we free? Are we not free? And of course, there were people escaping to freedom. There was also a time before this when freed slaves would escape to the North. And once you were in the North, or once you crossed over into the northern soil, you were considered free. But I believe it was 1849, I forget the name of the act and forgive me, but people were given permission to come into the North and hunt down their slaves, and bounty hunters would actually go and reclaim the people that had gone to seek freedom. And it was because of this that it really started the abolitionists and the people that wanted the slaves to be free, to really the onset of the Civil War, right? So here we are, 1865, finally, all enslaved people are set free. And so this has started out as a celebration in Texas that now we're celebrating all over the country. I'll go to my next slide here. So just a little bit more history on Juneteenth. It's actually the oldest nationally celebrated commemoration of the ending of slavery in the United States. Okay, so right after this happened in Texas, it became a state holiday in Texas in 1980. And it's celebrated with parades and memories. And then slowly after that, more and more states started to catch on and start celebrating this holiday that's, considered America's second Independence Day. So you might ask, so why shouldn't we all celebrate freedom for all? This isn't just an African American's holiday. Honestly, every American should want to celebrate the ending of a very terrible chapter in American history. Historically, communities would celebrate Emancipation Day or Juneteenth with family barbecues or cookouts. Communities would have parades and festivals, and they were often supported by the regions that they came from. Traditional celebratory foods would include watermelons, barbecued ribs and coleslaw, all your fun summer favorites. Also, strawberry or red cola juice became a favorite, especially in the South. Going back to the beginning of the celebration of Juneteenth, families would remember Emancipation Day by having the elder in the family or a family pastor would read hymns from the Bible. They would sing gospel music and just really celebrate freedom. I can think of, dating back to Exodus, probably reading some songs or some stories from Exodus about when the Hebrews were liberated from Egypt. Very, similar feeling there of breaking the chains of slavery. Singing and just remembering and prayers and love and support. More recently, a lot of the celebrations that are happening in communities will have, reggae music and African percussion. Americans from Africa really trying to get close to their roots. So you'll see a lot of bands playing, African percussion drums and the colors and the vibrancy. Right now, people are playing more socially conscious hip hop and rap, the kind of music that actually has a word or something to be spoken. A lot of communities will have spoken word, poetry with heart and spirit. So it's very exciting to see that this is happening and getting more awareness in our country. I'm excited for an event that's actually happening in Bethlehem this weekend at the Steel Stacks. We're going to be celebrating Juneteenth out there with our community. Some local organizations are going to be selling food and crafts, and we're going to have music and spoken word. So I'm very excited about that. So since, you may be still just kind of like, where did this all come from? I've never heard of this, or maybe you do know even more about Juneteenth than most people. I'll tell you a quick, personal note. I hadn't heard about Juneteenth. I wasn't growing up celebrating it. I wish we were, but I didn't hear about Juneteenth until about 2016. I remember, my youngest daughter was a baby, and my oldest daughter and I went to the bookstore, and there was a table that had all of these Juneteenth books on it. It was Barnes & Noble, actually, so I was proud of them for having just all this representation on their table. I'm like, what is this? And I picked up one of the books, and I'm like, why have I never heard of this? I was almost sad because I'm like, why have I never heard of this? And then I was happy because it is such an important holiday. So here's some great books if you can catch their titles. I know I'm going to share some of these resources with Reggie, so if you guys have like a company internet site or just a way to kind of share some of this information, we can definitely get this book list out to you. there was an episode of Blackish a few years ago where the whole episode was about Juneteenth, and the main character, Dre, he had a very similar story. He hadn't heard of Juneteenth, and then he started to wonder why his family didn't celebrate it. And as we're learning about the history, there's these really great animated clips and almost musical theater clips where the cast is singing and telling the story of Juneteenth. It is a very good episode. I encourage you to catch some of those clips on YouTube or watch the entire episode if you can. It's streaming on some services, I'm sure. And, I'm just so excited. I'm trying not to miss anything, but, there is a whole list of resources out there. And we captured this list. I actually did a presentation for my company last year, and we captured a lot of articles and information to share with my colleagues. So we have a book list. We have, 12 things you might not know about Juneteenth. There's so much information out there. I mean, honestly, if you Google it, you're going to find it. But I encourage you to look into what's happening in your community this weekend. Saturday is Juneteenth. So I'm sure if you look out there and you see what festivals or events, there might be some restaurants hosting a special menu or offering incentives or savings. Hey, all you have to do is ask, right? Seek and you shall find. So really, I just encourage everyone to accept Juneteenth as this second Independence Day, freedom for all people. And let's come together and just celebrate that. We have a lot to be grateful for. Oh, and I will take some time for questions.
We appreciate that. I'm like raising my hand. I'm like, what do I do? Oh, but thank you so much, Tanisha. And Reggie, I'm definitely going to divert to you in just a moment. I just wanted to make sure that I noted the act that Tanisha made mention of. That was an excellent presentation. I wish we had time to watch even one of those clips that you actually were able to share last year when you did a presentation similar to this for your corporation, which I was privileged to be able to see. They were just so enlightening. But the name of the act was the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850.
Thank you.
And it was actually the act that required that slaves be returned to their owners, even if they were in a free state. So that was passed September 18th, 1850. And that was one that I learned about a few years ago as well. I didn't learn about that in high school. I didn't even learn about it in college. And it was just mind-blowing that, things like that went on. So thank you so much for sharing. And Reggie, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Tanisha. That was fantastic.